Elizabeth, can I turn to you and pick your brains, please, about Boots UK and your partnerships, particularly in terms of Macmillan, cancer support, and about shared values. Can you enlighten us, please?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Charlotte's just said would resonate. Boots for many years has a number of collaborations, and in the sustainability sector, before we talk about Macmillan, I think the problems are so great and so large that the only way to address those problems is actually to collaborate. So we've actively been partners with people like WWF and RAP from the kind of early 1900s, or 1900, not the 19th century. That would be a long time, although Boots has been around a long time, not that long. And that's also true of our charity partners. We were with Breast Cancer Care for 14 years, Eva Peel for 3 years, and I would describe those as very strong collaborations. When we became part of Alliance Boots, one of Stefano Piscina's and Alliance Boots' values is partnership. And I think we learned through that to really make a difference, then actually you should look for a deeper meaning, a deeper reason, rather than problem solving, which is what you said, to establish a partnership. And so our partnership with Macmillan, and it genuinely is a partnership, was based on Macmillan's desire to be able to get in touch with, to connect with everyone living in the community affected by cancer. There are 2 million people living with cancer. The good news in some ways, if you can say about that statement, is people are living with cancer, whereas 10 or 15 years ago the prognosis wasn't so great. But they need support in those communities. And we Boots have pharmacies in every community around the UK. We have 2,500 pharmacies with trained pharmacists in each of those stores, and lots of healthcare assistants and very willing colleagues who want to help in their communities. So Kieran Devan and myself met over a number of months to genuinely determine, if we came together, was this going to be a partnership that could be sustained over time? And it wasn't just about raising funds, raising money, which of course we do, but I was very clear at the time, if they wanted the biggest fundraiser, probably Boots weren't that they could find other retail partners who could help them raise potentially more millions than we do. But the relationship that they wanted was much deeper. It was genuinely about how our two brands could come together to actually positively impact and affect people living with cancer, and not just the individual patients affected by cancer, but their families and the support mechanism around them. And that's really at the heart of it. The good news for Macmillan is actually, because it has won the hearts and minds of our colleagues in store and our customers, then we have raised more money than we could have possibly imagined that we would. But we are now, and it is 18 months, 2 years, we are now really just beginning to make the kind of difference that we wanted to, because most of our pharmacists now are trained on oncology drugs. More and more, the NHS is wanting patients not to go to outpatients, but to come into their community to be treated, and we're working with them to make that happen. So we do see the way in which we're working, I think, to your point, is two strong brands that actually fit with each other, where people, when they look at Macmillan and Boots, go, that works, that fits, that feels right. We've had to learn about how Macmillan operates as an organisation. They've had to learn about how Boots operates as an organisation. There are frustrations at times that we don't move fast enough, one or t'other. There's also been a real shared learning. Some of my team have spent time inside the Macmillan, and their chief operating officer has spent a few weeks with our executives really understanding how our businesses operate. So a much greater understanding of how the business operates, what our strategic objectives are as a business as regard our kind of social policy, working with understanding them. And I think over time you will therefore see a greater impact on the communities and people living in our communities as a result of what I call effectively a partnership. And it feels good to to be where we are today. We were recognised as the most recognisable partnership in the charity and business sector just last month, which is only some 18 months after the partnership, without us spending any above-the-line or advertising or marketing monies, putting that message out there. It's really by people seeing how our colleagues in store and what we as a business are doing with Macmillan.
So if I have cancer and I walk into one of your shops,
yeah.
What's going to happen to me if I go and take my prescription up to the counter?
So you would, if someone would recognise you as a patient, they would just, the level of interaction that you want would be determined by the level of interaction that you actually wanted. Some patients just simply want to come in, have their medicines. Other patients want to come in and they want it to be, they want to have a chat, they want to go into the consulting room, talk about how they're feeling, how their diet's been affected, and as a result of that, knowing the various interactions of the drugs, then the pharmacist could talk to them about how they could change perhaps the way they were taking their medicines. Some of them just want to talk about how it's actually affecting them and their family. So it depends on the type of conversations you wanted to have. You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a very personal relationship, obviously, over a very significant illness. Much more of a business partnership you have in your mini-city, Colin. So help us here. You've got 320, I believe, companies associated with Heathrow. How do you share solutions in that environment? It's mighty complex.
Well, Charlotte said partnership. I think you said it was hard and slow at the beginning. That sounds a bit like an aircraft sat at the start of the runway. It is, and to get passengers on time, safely, comfortably in the air takes collaboration between a dozen, 20 or more organisations. You have immigration, you have police, you have catering companies, you've got ground handlers, you've got air traffic control. Interestingly, we simply don't have the contractual levers to force things to happen. But whatever goes wrong, we all then suffer, and when it goes right, we all win. So in fact, it's an entirely natural environment for all of our business concerns, not limited to sustainability, for us to collaborate. What the Heathrow Leadership Group does is to bring together around about a dozen, slightly more, of the key organisations, not just key organisations, but also we chose people, generally the chief executive, with the interest and the stature to take time a couple of times a year. And what that does is, I think it provides visibility, it provides the conditions in which those people within the business who are driving initiatives can get traction. They can get things to go because they know it's of interest to the senior people in the organisation. They know it's visible. They know it's aligned with the business strategy. So I think it's something we seek to do with every aspect of our business, and it's entirely appropriate for the same sustainability agenda.
You're prepared to share with us some of the wins to date?
Well,
Please?
it's interesting. Around the Heathrow Leadership Group, you obviously get some different personalities. You get some who are more interested in grand visions, and some, and I'd slightly include myself in this category, who would say, well, in order to save the world, you have to start by saving something. So let's do something really practical and short term. And it's good that there's that tension. I think I'd highlight 4 things that we've focused on, and you can see there's a range of relatively nitty-gritty, quick, and the relatively bigger ones. Staff commuting to work. 76,000 people, 77,000 people coming to the size of a small city every single day, getting people out of individually occupied cars onto public transport or into car share schemes. We now have the biggest car share scheme, I think, on the planet, and it's growing. So that's one thing that had a pretty quick impact. Slightly longer term build, we have a huge number of vehicles running around within the perimeter. Far too many, actually, because the 320 is overly atomized, I would say. To get that down is going to take longer, but at least measuring and understanding what the starting point is for that is a key enabler to saying we're making progress year by year. I think one example within which, without collaboration, we are zero, is waste. because we have to deal with waste in a consistent way. Everyone produces waste, and it only takes one organisation to contaminate some carefully segregated waste stream for the work of all of the others to be zero. So it's not just that the sum of the total is more than the total is more than the sum of the parts. Actually, it's worse than that. One player can completely drive everyone off track.
So do you have the John Lewis sort of results list, like the good guys and the bad guys, published to the management, of all the people? Like, the store in Aberdeen didn't sell very much furniture last month, but the store in, I don't know, Cheshire did.
We do.
So
the
Aberdeen manager commits suicide.
Well, we do that discreetly and internally amongst companies doing the same things, ground handlers, how well they're doing on a number of different issues, airlines for that matter. Of course, it's discreet. We're not looking for external visibility on those issues. Perhaps the biggest impact, though, is we employ a huge number of people, and at least half of the employees come from the local environment. We've set up and run within BAA a focus on retail employment for quite a few years. And by teaming up with the rest in the partnership, we've got a focus on construction and on aviation careers such as engineering, on logistics, to add to that. And 400 people put in jobs just last year from locally. We have schemes to pre-employment schemes to help people succeed in interview and know those basic skills. So some of it's pretty nitty-gritty. I think there are obviously huge issues too, like reducing carbon emissions.
Yeah.
That is a task indefinitely that's going to go on into the future.
Yeah. Okay, that's a very good point to throw it open to the floor. So, ladies and gentlemen, those of you with us yesterday will remember I'm pretty cruel about questions. So got to have name and company, please. Questions, not statements or commercials, and single issues only. So come on, be brave, hands up, having put you completely off asking a question. Come on, somebody must be brave. I could say pathetic. Okay. Okay. So can I just ask you, therefore, how did your involvement, Elizabeth, come about in this partnership? Who was the driving force? Was it you or was it Macmillan? How did this romance start? Who was romancing whom to begin with?
It was actually rather fortuitous. When not long after I came into the role, we had a number of collaborations with Partners on Charity where we were raising funds. It was a fundraising collaboration, and it had been in place for many years. We decided that we should actually become famous for one and decide which of those partners it should be. So we went out to speak to both customers and colleagues and asked them to nominate who they would want to, and we got it down to a short list. At the same time, there was a smaller charity called Backup, which some of you may or may not know, which was actually set up to take information out to patients. And I was approached by them, Keith Mills, who ran it, was chair at the time. It was about to be reversed into Macmillan. So that was the fortuitous conversation. So I was introduced to Macmillan just at the time. Our colleagues were saying, and our customers were saying, actually, a preferred partnership would be with Macmillan. And then, as I said, Kieran Devan, who's the chief executive, and I guess, began to romance each other and come up with that, yes, this is a sustainable plan that we think we can work. And as I say, we're in the foothills of it. It's 2 years, so it does, to your point, it takes a long time to really get all of the benefits coming out if you're going to get the organisations working in the way in which you want. We're pleased with the progress, but we've still got a huge amount to go after.
Okay. Any things from the floor? Any points from the floor, please? Gentleman here, could you get him a mic, please? Thank you.
Hello, my name's Brian Hancock. I work for Morgan Sindall plc, a construction company. It's great to hear the successes of the partnerships that you've outlined. The flip side is there are lessons to learn in terms of where it hasn't gone wrong. Would the panel care to comment on sort of 2 or 3 pitfalls to be avoided in collaboration work?
Who wants to lead on that? Pitfalls.
Well, I think that the judgment that I battled with colleagues, some of whom are sat in the room, I think, was how big, how bold do we make the objectives? Do we have an intention to halve aviation emissions by 2050, or do we seek to improve waste recycling by 2% next month? And I think those are quite difficult judgments. And you do have some organizations who are or some individuals who are much more oriented towards the latter. That was their personality, that was their interest, and other more pragmatic types who were a bit skeptical, frankly, about the aspiration to change the world without the practicality of doing something. So I think that judgment and getting it right, and the construction firms at Heathrow have a really big impact and got seriously involved in recruitment. Now, the construction companies got every reason to do that. You'd rather your people come from 5 miles away than from the other end of the country. It's more stable, it's less expensive. There are lots of advantages to that. So I'm not suggesting it was altruistic. It was very straightforward business interest. But the construction companies have been effective at ganging up with our retail initiative to get local people employed in Heathrow. So I think self-interest, I think good understanding of the business and good judgment on choosing the targets, which aren't too bold but aren't too trivial either.
Okay. Elizabeth?
Yeah, you called it romancing. I would actually spend time up front, if you really are going in for a true partnership, to understand, are your strategic goals aligned? Because if your strategic, and I think this came through in the research, if your strategic goals aren't aligned, then once you've kind of hitched to each other, it's quite hard and it's quite painful. Because one wants to go off in one direction and you want to go off in another. And it's not just the strategic goals, it's the culture of the two organizations as well. So to be really confident that you've spent enough time understanding that your goals are aligned and that culturally you can make it work. Doesn't mean to say you have to have the same culture in each organization, but culturally that it's not oil and water. The two cultures will absolutely mix. I think those would be the two things that I would look for. Where it's failed for us is where, if you're a big brand and putting your name to something where genuinely you've made it wrong because they want to go off in a direction that just does not fit with your brand positioning and your business objectives. And at that point in time, you wouldn't compromise on that, and it will eventually break down. So getting alignment and making sure your culture fit would be, and I think that's true in any business relationship or any kind of personal relationship, so it's not that different.
Charlotte, anything to add to those comments?
I think on similar themes, the two really that jump out from the research when we spoke to different partners within the same collaborations, to really ensure that each of the partners understand why they're at the table. Yeah. And I think everyone comes with slightly different reasons, but the understanding across the table that others have come for different reasons is absolutely key to ensuring momentum. And the other is being clear and being able to manage the impact and being clear on what you want to measure. And when you do measure it, coming back and that again giving it momentum so that it just doesn't fizzle out. And a lot of the ones we looked at that had fizzled out, beginning to, were because we weren't able to really look at what was happening as a result.
Okay, that's helpful. Another question, please, from the floor. Thank you. Over here. Get a mic over here, please.
Hello, Marie from Accenture. Particularly interested to understand how do you go beyond individuals working together? So how do you sustain sort of collaboration long term, not just individuals going on well, and if that person actually leave the organization, then practical, perhaps practical measures on how you ensure that the partnership is sustained beyond individuals. Okay. That'd be great. Thanks.
So how do you sustain the transition of people, so the loss of people within a partnership arrangement, so that the partnership endures even though the people may have changed?
And for mine, it has to be an organizational partnership. So. And that does, so if you're going to go into two things, one, I had to get my board level on side, and I would, we were talking earlier, I think the BITC and Boots relationship is a partnership because actually it's supported at the very senior level with our chief executive officers and then all the way down through different levels within the organisation. And therefore, someone will come and go, but because it is so weaved into the organisational objectives, then it's sustained. And that's equally true for the work we're doing with Macmillan's. Start at the top. They then have to, within their organisation, Kieran has to get everyone aligned and around his executive table, and then it feeds on. And it was a big change. You know, they have never had this kind of partnership. So their fundraising people their only way of dealing with big partners was about fundraising activity. That wasn't our primary motive. That was quite hard for them at times when we weren't coming to the party going, yes, the most important thing is this. So it has to go through the organisation, and the role of the leader introducing it has to make sure that they've got the leadership above them and the leadership of the teams underneath them absolutely bought into it. So communication, which again came through as one of them. You have to communicate about the purpose, why, the objectives, how you're doing, how everybody's contributed to the performance against them.
More complicated for you with so many partners and varying agendas. So how do you manage this and keep the enthusiasm and pace going?
Well, I've got sort of one very earthy, pragmatic point to that and one slightly grander one. The earthy, pragmatic one is just put it in the diary. We have twice a year, the chief executives, it's in their diary. And they come. That puts some pressure on us, of course. We better make it worth their while. If you're going to get chief executives to turn up...
Is that a good lunch, or is that the worthwhile bit? Or?
The lunch doesn't work these days. It has to be pretty short, and it has to be, you know, you have to have people leaving saying, I'm glad to come to that. Because if a chief executive comes along and says, actually, I'd rather I wasn't there, for sure, next time he will find a way to delegate. Yeah. And if you delegate once, you'll delegate twice. And if you delegate twice, it'll disappear. So I think that sounds easy to say, put it in the diary. The practicality is you have to really make it worth coming along, which means real substantive progress, which means real people working really hard to get stuff happening of which everyone feels proud and glad to be associated. I suppose the slightly grander thought is, following Elizabeth's, that for us, the question of sustainability is a fundamental strategic question for the business. Our permission to operate, let alone grow, is absolutely constrained by the extent to which people think aviation, and Heathrow specifically, is bringing good things to society or bad things to society. So it's a fundamental part of our agenda, the board's agenda, to improve. We're not going to be perfect anytime soon, so our objective is to get better every single day. And it's not a side interest. It's fundamental to our being.
Can you just give us an idea of some nice surprises, unintended consequences that have arisen from partnership? Not the bad things, but the upside points that you hadn't expected from this collaboration.
Well, I think we got awarded a Platinum Award by BITC very recently. And that was a very interesting surprise. In retrospect, I mean, I think it has made a difference. And we have moved some issues on, and we've made progress in ways that we wouldn't have done if... Now, our particular... I said 77,000 people working at Heathrow. Only 10% of that are BAA people. So if we're fantastic efficient within my organisation, that's only 10% of Heathrow.
Good one. Pleased you like your Platinum Award in the index. Elizabeth, thanks for the little push there.
I think one of the unintended consequences, I think, is we're a stronger recruitment brand. People, you know, Boots has always been a strong recruitment brand, but actually people now want to come for an organisation that genuinely, they have known has a history in terms of doing the right thing on our sustainability agenda and others, but actually in their community, when they are seeing that they're doing the right thing, people then want to come work towards the organisation, and I think that's and therefore it feels like a better place and a more fulfilling place to work. So it goes to the goodwill that we get both from the communities we're in and to the people coming to work for Boots.
Yep, goodwill, licence to operate. One other quick question, please. Anyone else got a quick point to make here? Well, those of you who were in the room last night when we were talking about, you know, how's the planet going to survive with 9 billion people, and you heard the boss of Desso, the carpet manufacturer, talking about cradle to cradle. I mean, his whole model is around collaboration and finding partnership and about making sure that his waste goes somewhere else on a sustainability partnership so that it gets broken down and reused, not doing it all himself, but about creating partnership. So we are seeing, ladies and gentlemen, a lot more business-to-business collaboration out there as we try to address some of these agendas, as well as charity, voluntary sector, third sector, and the public sector cooperation, which is sort of world that you're in with immigration and everything else, as the means of moving businesses ahead. So can I, on all your behalf, thank our speakers for their great contributions and for your support. Thank you.